a team that fights together, stays together. Yes! 3 down! I like your tactics. Glory is yours. If you want it, this battle is yours. Take it!
Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Diaslayers, and in this video, all I gotta say is that it's back, baby. And I'm talking about that beautiful Western hand cannon that we've all been waiting for to come back in this game, and it's called the Old-Fashioned. Way back when in year 1, this thing was a powerhouse in Destiny 2, and it could absolutely decimate, eradicate, and obliterate every single guardian in its path. But back then, it was something complemented with a ton of team shots along with abilities. As you all know, the game has changed significantly since then, and so now it's up to us to determine as to whether or not this Old-Fashioned is still viable in Destiny 2. Now, some of you might be asking yourselves the question, okay Xander, well that's great, but how exactly are we going to do this? That, my friends, is a magnificent question, and the way in which we're going to do this is by looking at the weapon's perks, its base stats, its TTK stats, its range factor, how its shot rhythm is going to affect this overall range factor, its bold magnetism, and of course some god rolls that you should be looking for to make enemy guardians a little bit salty. Before we get into all that kind of jazz, what you gotta understand first is how to get your hands on this beauty. And the way in which you do so is by understanding that it's a world drop. And this means that it can drop from prime engrams, legendary engrams, or even from defeating a simple dreg. But the way in which I farmed for this colossal hitting monster was by going to Master Rahool and exchanging 25 legendary shards for legendary engrams. This same method is also how I farmed for a Godly Last Hope, a Hawthorne shotgun, and a Uriel's Gift. But I won't lie, the item pool size is quite large and it took me over 7,000 legendary shards to get my Old-Fashioned god roll. Clearly, RNG wasn't on my side in the slightest, but now that you guys know how to get your hands on this weapon, the only thing left to do is just to eviscerate that notification button and let's jump right into the video. It's at this point in time that I would normally like to go over the weapon's TTK stats, but before we can even get into that, you have to understand the roll that I'm using and why I classify this thing as a god roll. And so to really get into this, we can see the roll that I happen to have right there on screen. It's got killclip, quickdraw, drop mag, hitmark HCS, is an adaptive frame weapon, and has a stability masterwork with an Icarus mod. Right off the bat, we know that this thing has some extremely high lethality factors, and that's because of one perk called killclip. And the reason that we can proc this frequently is due to its second perk, aka drop mag. Now if you want to couple this specific hand cannon with something like say a sniper or a shotgun, then it's going to do glorious for both those two types of weapons because it's got quickdraw. And so that then means that we happen to body shot with a sniper, then boom, we can whip out our pistol and finish him off no problem. But if we're also using a shotgun, then that's perfectly fine as well, because if somebody happens to push us when we're not expecting us, then bada bing bada boom, we whip out our shotgun and adios, bye bye. As far as the stability masterwork goes, I'm not gonna lie, that could certainly be a lot better there. I could have something like say a range masterwork or something else along those lines. But what I also want to mention here is that I happen to have an Icarus mod, and that's fantastic for this weapon because that then allows me to use it much more in the air and get some crazy crispy shots that I simply won't be able to get otherwise. Now that you've heard my logic and reasoning, I think that you really understand why as to this thing is a god roll, and we're going to get into some more god rolls later on in the video, but for right now what I want to focus on is the weapon's TTK stats. And so I'm sure by now that you've already realized that this thing is then doing 70 points of damage per crit and 47 points of damage for a body. Looking solely at body shots and body shots alone, this thing's going to need 5 body shots, which is then going to associate to a 1.73 body shot TTK, and that right there is despicable and detestable in so many levels. But what gets significantly better is the weapon's optimal time to kill, and that's going to be at precisely 0.87 seconds with 3 critical headshots. However, I also want you to recall that this thing happens to have killclip, and so when you happen to have killclip rocked, this weapon's then doing 93 points of damage for a crit and 62 points of damage for a body. As far as body shots go, this thing's optimal time to kill is definitely going to improve and only take 4 body shots to associate to a 1.73 body shot TTK. Unfortunately, the weapon's optimal time to kill isn't going to increase and it's still going to be at 0.87 seconds when killclip is procced, but what happens instead is it makes it much easier to get, and it only requires 1 crit and 2 body instead of having to have those 3 crits without killclip. Just to kind of recap everything that I've just said, I want to put all that information right there on screen. And so on the left, we happen to have the weapon's base TTK stats, and on the right, we happen to have the weapon with killclip. The two things that I really want you guys to note here is that number one, all these calculations were done with a Guardian at 10 resilience or tier 10 resilience, aka 201 points of health. Secondly, I do all my computations in a frame-by-frame analysis, so that then means that I count how many bullets it actually takes to down somebody. I also count the frames in between those bullets to really get the weapon's optimal TTK, and of course its rate of fire, and that's why you happen to see 138.46 instead of 140 like what the game says for the weapon's rate of fire. Now just to kind of put that 0.87 optimal TTK into perspective for you, what I want you all to know is that a last word has an optimal time to kill at 0.53 seconds, whereas a blast furnace has something like 0.73 seconds, a spare rations has one at 0.8 seconds, a bygones has one at 0.93 seconds, and a Status Revolver has one that is at 1 second on the dot. Obviously, this old-fashioned has an optimal time to kill at 0.87 seconds, which is on the higher end of all those weapons that I just mentioned. And so is this really good or bad? Well, it can be very, very good, but what I really think that this comes down to is some of the weapon's base stats, and in particular the weapon's range, along with its overall shot rhythm. A weapon's shot rhythm is very, very different for every single hand cannon in this entire game, and the old-fashioned is no different. And so what really makes this thing have a unique shot rhythm is the weapon's stability factor, aim assistance, and recoil direction, and included within that is the weapon's bounce intensity. To really see what I mean by this, what we're going to do next is look at the weapon's base stats, and you guys can see all those stats right there on screen. I'm not gonna lie, the weapon's range factor is mediocre at the very, very best, only at 49 I-100. But the weapon's stability stat is really, really good at 65, its overall reload speed is insane at 79, and the weapon's aim assistance and recoil direction are spectacular at 70 and 95 respectively, followed by the weapon's bounce intensity that is vertical and only at 5. When you couple this with the weapon's handling speed at 51, it becomes a very good weapon, especially if you happen to have quickdraw like this one does, and that then means that it can be utilized in a very, very aggressive playstyle, and as you all know, that's exactly my cup of tea. Now we'll come back to range in just a little bit, but for right now, the weapon's overall shot rhythm is exceptional because its stability stat, aim assistance, and recoil direction and bounce intensity are all marvelous and spectacular in so many ways. And the real way in which we can see this is by going to a private match so then you guys can really see just that. So here I am shooting the old-fashioned at this wall. I'm spamming my shots as fast as I possibly can without trying to have any kind of recoil control at all. You can tell that from right there, it's pretty much vertical and vertical alone. And then when I do this exact same thing via hip fire, we see that once again, it's just that, vertical. However, I'm going to play that hip fire mechanic one more time and zoom in and also put in slow motion. Because here I want you to realize that the weapon's overall bloom factor is getting significantly greater after the weapon's third or fourth shot, and those little hit mark sites are never coming back within the weapon's overall circle. This tells us two things, that the weapon's overall shot rhythm is very, very good, as it's going to allow us to have that same vertical overall pattern time and time again, and we can master that very, very effectively. But it also means number two, that we have to be able to land our shots, especially within those first 3 or 4 shots, because if we don't, then the weapon's overall consistency is going to be despicable and go skyrocketing through the roof. You don't want that, I don't want that, nobody wants that. And so to really be able to land our shots a little bit more effectively, we have to know this weapon's optimal effective range. We're going to go directly back into those private matches, and so here I am with my Darcy measuring 26 meters. At 26 meters, the old-fashioned's doing 70 per crit, but going back only 1 more meter to 27 meters, the old-fashioned then does 66 per crit. And this means that this particular old-fashioned only has an effective range at 26 meters. Despite that, I want to be very, very clear and say that you might happen to have a different perk combination, and this is then going to give you a different overall effective range. And so these results are going to vary from roll to roll, but just as a very good baseline, you then know that this thing's then going to have an optimal effective range at 26 meters. Now some of you might be asking yourselves the question, is this good or bad? And to be honest, it's kind of both. And the reason why I say this is because what really is then going to dictate the weapon's overall effectiveness is number 1, the weapon's overall shot rhythm, but number 2, the weapon's bullet magnetism. And to really see this, we once again have to go into those private matches and test this out at 15 and 30 meters. At close range distances, aka 15 meters, the old-fashioned has a moderate bullet magnetism on the right hand side of the head, but on the top side of the head, it's mediocre at the very, very best and still leaves a little bit to be desired. Going back to 30 meters, here is where we see a gargantuan difference on both the right hand side of the head and on the top side of the head. So much to the point that I even thought that Luke Skywalker was using the Force to make those bullets curve. In all seriousness, I'm missing by a drastic margin and I'm still able to land shots when realistically I simply shouldn't be. But what does this mean to you? It means that in those close range distances, you have to land more of your shots. But if you're going to miss, then I would recommend to miss and get used to missing on the right hand side of the head, as you have more overall bullet magnetism and thus more leniency to miss more of those shots there. On the top side of the head, this isn't the case, at least for those close range distances. But as soon as you happen to get to that 30-meter distance, aka mid to long range distances, and this is when we see some crazy out of this world bullet magnetism, and it's then going to allow us to hit many of those critical headshots, getting the weapon's optimal TTK at 0.7 seconds that much more frequently. Essentially what I'm telling you is that if you want to be able to land those crispy, spicy, and oh so juicy headshots, then definitely stay in those mid to long range distances. But if you happen to get into those close range distances, then pace your shots and make sure that you're landing every single one. Because if you don't, then you're going to get obliterated by Exodia, sent to the Shadow Realm, and you definitely don't want that to happen. And having said that, I think that you guys now fully comprehend as to how you're supposed to use this weapon in a wide variety of situations, whether it be in a close, mid, or cross-map engagement. And so the very next thing that I want to cover is some other god rolls that you guys should be looking for, and the way in which we can start this off is by looking for some very specific perks in the second, third, and fourth columns, and we can see all those right there on screen. As far as that first column of perks goes, you really can't go wrong, and we'll come back to this in just a couple of seconds. But for the second column of perks, we have accurate rounds, drop mag, tactical mag, and flared magwell. Ensuing this is the third column of perks, and here we happen to have slide shot, quick draw, demolitionist, and fiend frenzy, followed by our fourth column of perks, and that's then killclip, moving targets, snapshot, and explosive payload. If you happen to get a roll that has some of those combinations of perks that I just mentioned, then you're off to a very good start. But there are a couple of rolls that I want you to really be on the hunt for in regards to some superb lethality, range, and cleanup rolls. Now you already know one very good lethal roll, which is one that you've been seeing throughout this entire game footage so far, and that's killclip, quick draw, and drop mag. But there is a second lethality roll that some of you might even argue is better, and we can see this right there on screen. It's got killclip, fiend frenzy, accurate rounds, and the hitmark HCS sight. The reason why you want to have killclip and fiend frenzy together is because of course you're going to have to reload in order to proc killclip, and thus fiend frenzy is going to do exactly that, and you're going to do this every single time that you happen to get a kill, and it doesn't matter how you get that kill. It can be a critical headshot, it can be a body shot, it can be whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're going to get that very fast reload speed, and just like that, killclip is prot, and you're going to have some very high lethality factors. Now the reason why I suggest accurate rounds and the hitmark HCS sight is because both those two things are going to increase the weapon's effective range, and it's going to have absolutely zero penalties in doing so. Now I realize that some of you may not want a very high lethality roll, and instead you might want something that's going to have a very good overall range roll, and something like that is the roll that we can see right there on screen, and it pertains to explosive payload, slide shot, accurate rounds, and sure shot. With accurate rounds and sure shot HCS, you're then going to increase the weapon's overall effective range by plus 25. But also note that you are going to have some deficits in the weapon's handling speed as well as some other stats due to sure shot, because it's of course increasing the weapon's effective range the most with that particular sight. As far as slide shot goes, it's also going to reload that magazine every single time that you slide, and simultaneously it's then going to increase the weapon's range as you do so. And so once again we can clearly see that this is effectively a range perk. We then happen to have explosive payload, and with explosive payload, not only is this perk going to give an astronomical amount of flinch, but it's also going to give a very good range stat, because what it does is it distributes the weapon's damage output to be one that's consistent regardless of the range that you happen to be at, where the other damage is then going to be affected by damage fall off. With this kind of roll, you will literally have a range perk in every single column, and if RNG luck is on your side with a range masterwork, then I think it's safe to say that this thing is the definition of a range god roll. But there's a third type of roll that I think that you should be looking for in terms of a god roll, and it's going to pertain to cleanup kills. So to be more precise, the roll that I'm referring to is the one that you see right there on screen. It's got snapshot sights, quick draw, tactical mag, and fast draw HCS. With snapshot sights, you're then going to have a lightning fast aim down sight time. But more importantly than this, it's quick draw, because quick draw is also going to allow you to swap weapons faster, and it's also going to increase the weapon's ADS speed even more so. With this kind of cleanup roll on the weapon's lethal rolls as well as the weapon's range rolls, I think it's safe to say that you guys can tell that this thing definitely has a wide variety of playstyles that it can cater to. It can cater to an aggressive playstyle, a passive playstyle, or somewhere in between, and it's just solely going to depend on the weapon's roll that you happen to get. And so the next question that we have to ask ourselves is this one of the best hand cannons in the entire game? Some might say yes, and some might say no, but no matter where you fall on this spectrum, what I can say is that this thing right here definitely has one of the best shot rhythms, and thus is going to be very, very consistent. Personally, I love when a weapon is consistent, and so for that reason, I definitely think it's one of the best hand cannons in the game, and I also think that's very, very good for the kinetic slot, which I've been dying to have a very good 140 for, and to be honest, the Osprey wasn't my cup of tea, but once again, this is just how I feel about the weapon, and so by all means, let me know what you guys think about this thing down in the comment section below, and whether or not you like it, you don't, or you think that you're somewhere in between. And seeing that, I'm also very, very curious on some of the rolls that you happen to get, and if you happen to get something else that's very, very different that I haven't mentioned and might be fitting a different playstyle altogether. No matter what you guys say, you always know that I'm going to respect your opinions, and that is something that I can guarantee. Lastly, be sure to watch the newest, check the latest, and share, comment, like on social media because you are the greatest. That's much all I've got for you as of right now, Diaslayers, and as always, GG TNT.